It's that wonderful time of the year where I can start rounding up the GT7 content from 2024, and we're going to start off with perhaps the most popular of these, my top 10 personal cars of the year for 2024. So I've set out some rules in what qualifies a car for this top 10 list. Now of course, first of all, it must be a car released in 2024, not 23, not 22, or a car released upon launch. So it must be a post-launch car released from January to December of 2024. Now other things that go into it is my personal time spent with the car, how useful that car may be, how versatile that car may be, how fun it is, which is an absolute key factor. If you're not having fun, then it's really not worthy of the list. And of course, if the car is a worthwhile entry into Gran Turismo 7, whether being an entirely new car or a returning fan favourite. So let's get straight into it then, shall we? Starting off then, we have our honourable mentions first. These are cars that just narrowly missed out on the top 10 list for one reason or another. And we're going to start off then with the Volvo 240 SE. The iconic Swedish tank-like estate is finally here in Gran Turismo 7, and it is absolutely fantastic. This is an incredibly versatile car with a bunch of different customization options that can really make it feel like your own. Now it did take a while, but a little later down the line we got the BRZ drift engine swap, which was capable of 1200 brake horsepower plus, which is absolutely ridiculous. The car itself though is fantastic. If you just want to cruise around in a big old Swedish tank estate, you can go ahead and do that. If you want to build yourself a classic touring car, you can also go ahead and do that. And of course, if you do want to go absolutely nuts and build a BRZ swapped drift weapon, then yes, you can go ahead and do that now as well. This for me was one of the most versatile cars of the year and just narrowly misses out on a top 10 spot. Next up, well, this one is maybe a little bit controversial for different reasons. This is the Evo 8. Of course, coming alongside one of the later updates of the year in October, this is a fantastic all-round car. It will cost you a measly 80,000 credits, and you get some serious performance alongside that as well. Yet you can go ahead and put a drift engine swap in this thing. Now if you've been around this channel for a while, you will know that pretty much any generation of the Lancer Evolutions are some of the best 700pp grind cars in the entire game, in my personal opinion. They all make for fantastic track spec builds. However, there was also another generation of the Evo released this year, which, spoiler alert, you might just see a little later on, and in my opinion that was the better of the two. If the Evo 8 managed to get itself a race styled engine swap, then maybe, just maybe, it could have crept inside the top 10 over the other variant. So moving into my final honourable mention of the year, this is the Wraith RGT 4.2, of course released alongside the brand new physics update and Eigenaursvan back in July of 2024. So what happens when you take a Porsche 911, put it with an incredibly aggressive wide body and turn it up to the max, then you get the Wraith RGT 4.2. This thing is absolutely crazy, a little bit pricey at 360,000 credits, which is maybe the reason why it got moved down a little bit into the honourable mentions. Fully upgraded though, it's a 1000 brake horsepower monster and an absolute menace. Unfortunately though, it's incredibly thirsty and really not the most useful car of the bunch. And with that, it's time to move into the top 10. Number 10 then, the Nissan GTR T-Spec. The final swan song for the R35 GTR is here in Gran Turismo 7, and it may just be my favourite looking R35 generation GTR to exist. When it comes to modern day Gran Turismo and the R35, they kind of go hand in hand together. Now it is the most expensive GTR of the bunch at 200,000 credits, making it even more expensive than the more powerful GTR Nismo. However, I would say that looks alone just make this the absolute peak of the R35 GTRs in Gran Turismo 7. There's a bunch of different customization options available here, anything from drag wings to race wings. You can really do anything with this thing. With so many different ways to go ahead and build your T-Spec, it's an incredibly versatile car. Now there's no denying the car is starting to show its age. Let's be real, this thing came around in 2007 and is pretty much the same exact model with some tweaks tweaks and refinements that it's been for the last 20 years. It feels a little bit overweight at this point. Yes, it still has the 4-wheel drive system and of course the iconic launch control, but it is certainly starting to show its age at this point, especially in comparison to other vehicles around it, but it still is the absolute supercar killer it once was. And with the R35 being a modern day Gran Turismo icon, it felt fitting to just have this final last hurrah arrive in GT7. So for me, it makes 10th on my top 10 list. Moving into number 9, the Ford Escort RS Cosworth. Perhaps one of the most unexpected releases of the year, it finally arrived in the latest content update to GT7 and it's absolutely fantastic. This is one of those cult classic 1990s hot hatchbacks that really is fitting in almost any racing game, and unfortunately it doesn't necessarily feature that often. However, in-game in Gran Turismo 7 it's here in all its detail and beauty, and honestly it's a fantastic car, if a little underpowered. However, I will admit that I am hopeful in the future we get some sort of solid engine swap to take it up to that real life capability of 1,000 brake horsepower plus. However, in its current form in Gran Turismo 7, it is perhaps one of the most versatile cars I've tried this year. It's of course capable of rally, road, street racing, you name it, it can pretty much do everything. Mix that with iconic looks with the incredible beautiful whale tail and of course that 90s retro Ford charm, then you really are onto a winner here, and the Ford Escort RS Cosworth is fitting of a place in my top 10 list for GT7 in 2024. Let's move on then to number 8, the Audi R8 V10 Plus. This was a car I really didn't expect much from and it massively exceeded any expectations. For me, this could have been on any other year the ultimate German car in game, especially when it comes to road car variants, and unfortunately it will end up getting beaten by something else. However, in terms of that surprise factor and price point, this stands as one of my best bang for my bucks that I've spent in GT7 this year. At 300,000 credits it might seem a little bit pricey until you realise this thing is absolutely ridiculous when you start piling those upgrades on. Now I will be the first to admit that when it comes to the real world, the Audi R8 doesn't necessarily appeal to me, and I genuinely thought I'd probably get a couple of events out of it at most and that would be it, but I've been massively proven wrong in that way. This is a car that I consistently find myself coming back to just for the fun factor alone, and more recently it did get probably the most extreme engine swap in the entirety of GT7, being able to swap in the Bugatti Chiron engine swap for 1.6 million, putting out over 1500 brake horsepower fully upgraded. This thing is ridiculous, coupled with a 4-wheel drive system. Now there is another thing to know, that of course it's basically here to replace the aging Audi R8 4.2 Quattro, which has been in the game since day one and of course is one of the original Audi R8 models. And of course, fully upgraded, there is some serious aggressive kit options for this car which I think all look fantastic. In the end it ends up being one of the most surprising additions to GT7 in 2024 for me. Moving on to number 7, the Porsche 911 Turbo S 992 generation. Now, I did say that the Audi R8 did have the potential to be the ultimate German supercar of the year, but then, of course, in the most recent content update, the 911 Turbo S arrived. For me, taking the top spot of the best German car of the year for the road, this is an absolute machine. Costing once again, just like the Audi R8, 300,000 credits, also has a 4-wheel drive system. It continues the trend of the 911, going from sports car territory to full-blown supercar territory. This thing is ridiculous. The amount of grip it has, the way it performs in both stock and fully upgraded form, it's just absolutely insane. Now the car isn't perfect, there is a couple of issues with it that I do want to note. Number one is the sound design for this car. It just doesn't sound quite right. That doesn't mean that it sounds awful, but it doesn't sound as aggressive as the real world counterpart. And there also isn't the active area on the rear wing at the present. So I'm not quite sure what happened there, and I'm pretty sure that will get patched in at a later date. but when it comes to the look of the car, this may just be one of my favourite looking 911s to ever exist. And it's the same when it comes to the upgraded version as well. The performance, the looks, it all carries over to make an incredibly beautiful and aggressive supercar. Now, one thing to definitely take note of is the engine in this car. It is ridiculous in terms of its performance. It's absolutely fantastic, and I will touch on that more in a minute. But when it comes to customization options, admittedly it is perhaps the weakest of all the 911s in game, only having a couple of front bumper options as well as a couple of rear wing options, and that's actually going to be your lot. However, back to that engine, it was deemed good enough that as soon as the car came in game, day one the engine was swappable into both the 911 GT3 RS from the previous generation and also the Subaru Impreza WRX from 2014. Credit where it's due, this is a proper German powerhouse. Let's move into number 6 then, which for me was the Honda Civic EG. The old Gran Turismo starter car classic finally arrived in GT7 in all that beautiful detail. Of course, to many it may just be a typical grocery getter, but to many it's also a Honda that could possibly have a laptop inside of it, and we all know that you don't mess with those. Of course, it is a massive tuning icon and also a Gran Turismo icon to match. Now, of course, this isn't the first time we've actually seen the EG Civic in game. It did arrive last year in the form of the Garage RCR Civic, but of course this had a custom body kit on it, being a SEMA show winner, and it also actually had a K24 in it instead of the original B series. So a lot of players were wanting the original back, and well, here it is. You can now customize it and tune it to your personal preference, and I think it's absolutely fantastic in really showing off the tuner culture behind the EG Civic and why it's a firm favorite with a lot of Honda fans. It also got a day one engine swap in the form of the B18C Integra 98 engine swap. Now, this was one that I genuinely did not expect to get in game, but I would actually say that it just gives that extra poke to the EG, making a proper little track or time attack car. Now, I have to admit, in the real world I am a Honda fanboy. I do own a Type R, I do drive it daily, and I think VTEC is absolutely hilarious and great fun. Now, admittedly, the EG for me though is perhaps the most iconic of the Civic generations for just how much it featured in the late 90s and early 2000s for the tuner culture. I mean, even today in the modern world, we have the Kanjo Loop racers. Of course, you see these built for time attack all the time. You see people street racing them and putting out ridiculous horsepower. And I feel like that is really transferred over into GT7, where you can do street builds, track builds, you name it, you can probably do it. So for me, the classic starter car favorite is back, and it's better than it's ever been. Moving into number 5, the Nissan Skyline GTS R R31. I mean, there's going to be a bit of a trend in this later half of the list that there's a lot of Japanese bias here, but that's because a lot of the more iconic cars we've got this year have been Japanese, and the R31 is no different. This for me is the Skyline generation that really doesn't get any love, and it's great to see it in GT7. Of course, it's not the first time we've actually seen it. A couple of years ago we did get the Super Silhouette, which was absolutely fantastic and one of the best cars of 2022. So to finally see the road going variant is absolutely amazing. This means that we can go ahead and customize it and tune it to whatever build we like. This is a car that's capable of many things. You want to just cruise around in the road going stock variant, then you can go ahead and do that. Want to make a touring car? Once again, you can go ahead and do that. And you also do have a bunch of other cars you can properly race it up against. Or if you want to go down the crazy route and do some kind of engine swap drift build, you can go ahead and do that as well. For me, this has been one of the most versatile cars of the year, and it's a car that I find myself constantly running in custom races just for the fun of it. I've got a rally build, I've got a track build, pretty much anything you can think of, I have a build based on the R31 GTS-R. Well, speaking of engine swaps, this perhaps got one of my favourite swaps of the entire year. The RB26 from the R34 GTR was actually a swappable engine for this car, and it does make for some ridiculous builds, whether you want to go for a street racing ridiculous horsepower output build, or maybe even go for a drift build like I did here. Again, you can pretty much do it all. This was a fantastic inclusion. Just missing out on a top 3 spot, and of course I did kind of hint that this would be arriving, the Mitsubishi Evo 9. Of course, this did arrive earlier on in the year prior to the Evo 8's inclusion, and for me is the better variant of the two. it's more powerful, drives better, and builds better. And of course, it is held by the fact that it does get the Evo Group B rally engine swap, meaning we can do a full-blown race build with this, with of course that race fuel economy, which gives it a massive bump up the list. Now of course the 700 pp Le Mans, pretty much any of the Lancer Evos will do it. However, I would say the Evo 9 might just be the best of the bunch. My car of the year last year was surprisingly the Evo 3, and the Evo 9 continues that trend. However, with the ability to put that Group B rally car swap in and get race fuel efficiency, this really does bump it up, especially above the Evo 8 for that reason. When it comes to grinding mileage and money earned, the Evo 9 is probably my money maker for 2024 as well, earning me a ton of credits along the way. Now of course the Evo 8 and Evo 9 look very similar, they perform very similar in the base engine. However, for me the Evo 9 is just the better and faster variant of the two, hence why it takes number 4 on this list. Moving into number 3 then, the Subaru Impreza rally car. The iconic WRC machine driven by the late great Colin McRae is finally here in GT7, and I would say it's a bit of a Gran Turismo icon as well. Those iconic colours really fit into the game, and this might just be the single fastest 700 pp built car that we've ever had in game, capable of 3-minute 50 lap times, being one of the most versatile cars, of course based on a rally car, which can be transformed into a tarmac racer. Of course, when it comes to Gran Turismo, this may just be the most iconic rally car of the series. The beautiful colour scheme, of course the performance, everything we see from this car has always been fantastic, and to see it back in GT7 and just as strong, it's absolutely a fitted return. And of course we can't really take away that this was an icon of the WRC in the 90s, and even now one of the most memorable rally cars of all time. And I also can't fail to mention that iconic boxer growl that comes from this thing. So it's a legend of Gran Turismo, and it's a legend of the real world. It was a fantastic return in GT7 this year. Let's move on then to number 2, which for me is the Toyota GT1 TS020. Another Gran Turismo icon makes its long awaited return to the franchise. This is just one of those cars that I've seen people asking for since day one, and it did finally arrive in the beginning of 2024, and honestly it just didn't disappoint. Now a lot of other people will probably have put this in the number 1 position, and I can absolutely see why. What also helps is the fact that it's an incredibly useful machine at both the 800 pp Sardinia and 800 pp Spa. Thanks to this being a Group 2 machine, you get the, great features that come along with that category. Incredible tyre life, great fuel efficiency, incredible aero and handling, and also thanks to the ridiculous top speed of this car, you also get that as an added bonus. Now of course when it comes to the car itself, it is a true icon of the Gran Turismo franchise, and for me it was at its most iconic during Gran Turismo 2 and Gran Turismo 3. And to see it return in all that glory is absolutely putting a tear to my eye. It's a fantastic machine, and I was so happy to finally see this one return. And do you know what? What was great to see was just how much this car kind of pulled the Gran Turismo community together. I think as soon as it was kind of announced and seen in those silhouettes, a lot of people were absolutely buzzing for this car, and I can see why. The hype was unreal, and perhaps generated the most hype that I've seen for any car release ever post-launch GT7. Let's move on then to number 1. Taking my top spot in 2024 is the Honda NSX GT500 year 2000. Finally, they did it. The holy trinity of GT500 race cars is complete with the launch of the NSX GT500. This for me is undoubtedly the car that I've spent the most time with in 2024. It's so good. I am free of these things, as you can see, in all different period correct liveries, and of course, as mentioned, it is the completion of the holy trinity of GT500 machines alongside the Tom's Castrol Supra, and of course the Nissan GTR, the R34 generation. Finally, it is complete. All 3 of those cars are now in game, and it's only took over 2.5 years. Since its release, I have put thousands upon thousands of miles on every single one of my GT500 NSXs, and I may even go on to say that when it comes to iconic colour schemes of the times and Gran Turismo icons, this may be one of the biggest of the bunch. From Castrol to Mobile One, Ray Brigg, they're all here and all sponsored on the NSX SXs, and for me it does make it an absolute icon, maybe even more so than the likes of the Castrol Supra and the Pennzoil Skyline. And one thing that I cannot help but mention is the fact that it does outperform both of the other two models as well. So for me it's the best of the Holy Trinity, maybe even the most iconic, and of course is the completion of that trinity of vehicles. And for me they are perhaps some of the biggest Gran Turismo icons to ever exist, and to be able to go out and field all three on track is just a feeling like no other. Admittedly, at first when I first jumped in this car I was a little bit underwhelmed, until I realized only a few weeks later I was already racking up thousands upon thousands of miles and just having a sheer amount of ridiculous fun with this car, setting up custom races, tackling events. I found myself just absolutely loving this thing, and it's been the same ever since. So final thoughts then on my top 10 list of 2024. Overall it's been a fairly strong year, I'd say, for cars. When it comes to the good cars, they've been fantastic, but there's also been quite a few stinkers as well, which I will be releasing tomorrow in my top 5 worst cars of 2024 video. Anyway, in the end, this is just my personal top 10. Don't forget to let me know what yours is down below in the comment section, and I want to say a big thank you to all of my channel members and you guys who've watched this video until the end. I hope you have a fantastic holiday season and the rest of 2024. Take care guys, peace.